Okay, earlier you were talking to me about how folks slept on William W. Gregory, the African American City Councilman here in Charleston. And I just had a conversation with these guys from Oakland on my tour just now about that being a national phenomenon. See, what's happening is that while the generation before us, hey Mary, all right, sweetie, all right.
I ain't get the order yet. I walked into a see. I had to take care of some business. Go ahead.
But as I was saying, though, the problem is that while the generation before us fought and bled and died for the right to vote, what happened was that the generation that came both with ours and slightly after ours, they became apathetic toward these type of things. And you have the current generation of young people, not all of them, because you have Black Lives Matter and things like that, but you have so many that are politically illiterate because a lot of them didn't even bother to vote during the last election. Now they want to do these things. They're talking about abolishing the Electoral College and impeaching President Trump. And they don't understand that it doesn't work like that.
There you go.
Because you need 2/3 of the Senate to impeach him, and with our Senate, that's not happening. And to get rid of the Electoral College, that's a constitutional amendment where you need 2/3 of the Senate, 2/3 of the House, and 2/3 of the state. It doesn't work. So my thing is, if you don't play the game, you don't get to make the rules.
There you go.
So you have to learn and study politics before you can do anything about it. And you have, most importantly, you have to learn how this works, and you have to participate if you want real changes. See, you can get up there and be a Facebook militant, a keyboard activist, or a Twitter revolutionary if you want, but all you're doing is getting tired fingers by doing that. You have to go out and learn how politics is run, and then register to vote, and then be an active participant, and then, and only then, can you make real changes. And teach that to your children too.
Sir, that one vote. That one vote means so much to Charleston. It really, I'm grateful for the runoff because it wasn't sinking into folks what happened. I think slowly but sure in the last few days, it's sinking in what happened. They were just about to lose their grasp on something that's still Charleston. You look at the disparity report and we look at 28% black population.
Okay. Let me say this about the disparity report. Okay, I'm grateful to that. I'm very happy that Dr. Hussein and all of them did that. That's all fine and good.
Did the two
But
different?
the problem is that the people who already know about these inequalities, they already know, and there are a lot of people out there who don't want to know and don't care and who aren't going to bother to read it. So those of us who do know have to be and do care are the main ones that have to do something about all of this. And the key in all of this really, it's about educating the young people more than anything else.
And being a good citizen, there's a responsibility.
Exactly. And see, and so we got to keep up with that. Because if we don't do that, the other day I was at that rally for Steve Bannon, at that rally against Steve Bannon, let me make that perfectly clear. And I was saying that if we who have reason, who have logic, who have knowledge, and who have education about these things don't step up and get a handle on this, the United States of America is going to be ancient Rome 2 at a theater near you. And you see what happened with that in the first place, right? So the thing about it is, we can't let this thing be run by emotionalism, people getting misinformation off of social media and all of that. That's not going to get you anywhere. Learn the reality of how this works. Look up qualified websites that teach you about the electoral process. And by the way, before you vote, you have to understand you have to register 30 days before you can vote. You just can't walk out there and vote. Now, and then you have people talk about, well, I can't vote because I went to jail. No, here's how that works. If you committed a misdemeanor, you can still vote. That has no effect on your vote. If you do a felony, violent crimes, and I think everybody looking at this knows the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor. If you commit a felony, you have to jump through hoops and get pardoned and all that to register to vote. But if you just did a little misdemeanor, then you don't have, if you went to jail for child support and all that kind of stuff, that has no effect on your ability to vote. And then you have people talk about, well, see, I don't know nothing about politics. Hold up. If you can tell me who is going to the Super Bowl this year or who's going to the NBA playoffs? How do you know that? Or if you could tell me about Cardi B singing Bodak Yellow or what happened on Empire last night and all those things.
You can learn.
You learn that because you take the time to study that. If you can learn to take time to study those type of things, you can learn and study about these things that matter and have an effect on your daily life.
On the issue of your vote counts, when we look at that, just this one vote.
Yeah.
This one vote.
One vote. Because let me tell you another way how that works, okay? Back in 1960, John F. Kennedy ran against Richard Nixon, all right? John F. Kennedy won by about 100,000 votes in these United States, which means that if just a few hundred people in each of those cities, in each of those states, didn't vote, that could have gone the other way, which would have meant no Civil Rights Act, no Voting Rights Act, or any of that stuff that got us into where we could do these type of things in the first place, you see? So, and it's because so many people sat at home and said, well, Hillary's crooked and all this kind of stuff and didn't pay attention to these things. That's how Donald John Trump got into the White House, because so many people sat on their posterior anatomy and didn't do jack, okay? So now all you got, so at least now you learn. The election is not until 2020, but there's the Senate and the House elections in 2018, and that's who gives the president power. You got to register and vote before that for the 2018 elections, which would, if you were successful, take away his power. And then in 2020, you register and vote. You make sure that you're registered to vote so that you can vote him out in 2020 if you care so much. But if you want to sit back and be a Facebook militant, a keyboard activist, and a Twitter revolutionary, running your mouth off in the barbershop, then that's on you.
Now, just given that these local races, they count. We're going to this runoff next week.
November
21st.
And that's if
in two districts.
And that's right. If you are in the city of Charleston and West Ashley, that's when you vote.
Yeah, 6 and 10.
Right, 6 and 10.
6 and 10.
So please know the difference with that, okay? Because one time and to show how bad this political illiteracy thing is right now, I actually had some students tell me that they wanted to ask the mayor, what could he do for the minimum wage? That's not how it works. The mayor, that's a national issue, and your mayor learns local issues. That's why you got to read. You have to learn. You got to study.
Yes,
and
sir.
when you do those things, most of all, you got to put that into practice, because study without practice is vanity. And now my name is Damon Fordham, and I'm going back to my lunch.
And you will find him on his YouTube channel in the history class and lecture and Charleston tours.
You got that
Baby,
right.
he's there.
Have a
Thank
blessed
you,
day.
Professor Damon.
Sir.
That's it. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
He's got that look on his face.
Well, we're talking about serious things here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, as I was about to tell you, there's a reason that the condition of African Americans in the Charleston area is what it is. But some background is necessary for that. Now, some of your listeners and readers here and viewers are familiar with the great Robert Smalls. It's pictured on the cover of my book, Voices of Black South Carolina, that I wrote in 2009. But what a lot of people don't know is that you had the Reconstruction era between 1865 and 1877 in the southern states. That's where, after the South lost the war, contrary to popular belief, the Civil War that is, the Union Army occupied the South, and they rewrote constitutions in many of the southern states, from the slavery constitutions to a more egalitarian type constitution. For example, a lot of people don't know that this same Robert Smalls was one of 76 blacks and 43 whites who got together at what is now the J. Wages Waring Judicial Center over on Meeting Street to rewrite the Constitution of South Carolina. Now, Robert Smalls wrote in this new Constitution on January the 23rd, 1868, that resolved all children between the ages of 7 and 14 must attend some public school for at least 6 months out of the year for penalty of non-compliance. Robert Smalls was the foundation for the public school system in South Carolina. And Alonzo J. Ranzier, who was an African-American gentleman who was born on Pitt Street right here in Charleston, Alonzo J. Ranzier, who's shown right here, was the first black lieutenant governor of South Carolina during Reconstruction, from 1870 to 1872. His great-great-granddaughter, Linda Rousseau, is the head librarian at Charleston Southern University. Alonzo J. Ranzier said after Robert Small submitted that amendment that it was necessary because the reason South Carolina got into the Confederacy in the first place was because, quote, the gross ignorance of the masses. I'm going to pause there and let that sink in for a minute. Now, the Reconstruction era ended in 1877 with the Tilden-Hayes Compromise. Why? Because of violent resistance to Reconstruction through the South, beginning especially in Pulaski, Tennessee, December 24th, 1865, 6 Confederate veterans went to the Pulaski Courthouse and formed a new organization. They based its name on the Greek word for circle, which is kuklos, K-U-K-L-O-S, and the Scottish word for family, which is clan. So put it together, you get the message of that story. You get the message, right? And so these type of people ran the South after Reconstruction. And in South Carolina, you had Benjamin Ryan Tillman, okay? Benjamin Ryan Tillman wanted to undo everything in Reconstruction, including throwing out the 1868 Constitution and putting in the Jim Crow Constitution. Now, Booker T. Washington, the great educator from Malden, West Virginia. This man walked from Malden, West Virginia, 400 miles to Hampton Institute to get education back in the late 1860s and early 1870s.
There were no roads then, though.
Oh, indeed. Well, he knew it was at stake. And he became the president of Tuskegee University Institute in Atlanta, in Tuskegee, Alabama, which is now a university, right? When Benjamin Tillman tried to throw out the 1868 Constitution, Booker T. Washington said these words to Benjamin Tillman. Listen to this. You, honored senator, are a student of history. Has there ever been a race that was helped by ignorance? Has there ever been a race that was harmed by Christian intelligence? It is agreed by some that the Negro school should be practically closed because he cannot bear the burden of his taxes. Can an ignorant man produce taxable property faster than an intelligent man? Will capital and immigration be attracted to a state where there are 3 out of 4 are ignorant and where poverty and crime abound? Within dozens of years, the white people of this state will have helped the education of colored boys and girls at Claflin University and smaller schools. Have these educated men hindered the state or helped its reputation? And he went on to say, honored sir, do not misunderstand me. I am not selfish to make this repeal to the interest of my race alone, for thank God a white man is close to my heart to a black man. But always remember, what a man soweth, he shall also reap.
Amen.
And this is exactly what happened to South Carolina. Because they underfunded black education on purpose to maintain a permanent class of cheap labor in South Carolina. Don't believe me? These are the words of William Watts Ball, who was the editor of the Charleston News and Courier in the 1930s and 1940s. The development of a class of large white farm laborers mired in the same condition of Negroes might lead to the rise of some demagogue who would point out their mutual interests and wheel them together against the property class and give Negroes political rights, which would mean social upheaval.
What the?
Hello.
Okay.
All right. And Woodrow Wilson, who in 1909 spoke before a convention of high school teachers, where he said that they wanted a certain class of education for the people who would run things and another type of education for the ones who would do the necessary manual labor to keep society afloat. So therefore, the people such as A.B. Rhett, who ran the school board in Charleston during that period, these folks deliberately kept the education low, prevented the rise of black colleges in Charleston to keep the education low to maintain that permanent class of cheap labor. Esau Jenkins, the Martin Luther King of Charleston, back in July of 1968, told the News and Courier about how when he grew up on Johns Island, they would take the black children out of school during planting season, so that they would just come into the schools, take them out so they can go out and work into the fields, you see? And all of this has had an effect on the psyche of the people. Robert Morrison, who once owned gas stations here in Charleston, African-American gentleman, talked about how at Burke High, well into the 50s, they had triple shifts. where some students would come in for a few hours in the morning, others would come for a few hours in mid-afternoon, the others would come late in the afternoon. And how could you get education with that? So with that kind of legacy, this is the reason why that here in Charleston there's a long history of black people who have get up and go, got up and went. End of story.
And it's like we figured there's going to be a day. Oh, this will lead into the part about I was thinking about earlier. It's going to be a day when folks come home. They have to. They just like how they were flocking to Atlanta with degrees.
All right.
Will the museum help with that perspective? Is it going to be just another tourist spot?
But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that.
So true.
We need a complete revolution in mentality and culture along with that. When President Obama talked about eliminating the slander that reading a book and speaking English in a professional way is acting white, a lot of people jumped on it, but he was right.
Yes.
Because I was victimized by that when I was coming up.
They gave me an Oreo puzzle.
But I'm not surprised. But you see, here's the thing about that, though. You have a long, sad history of broken adults who were broken by the system. And Henry McNeill Turner, one of the great leaders that we had in the late 1800s, once wrote that it is difficult to expect broken parents to raise whole children.
Yes.
And so the child grows up with the parents all discouraged and speaking hopelessness and negativity, telling the children out of their own bitterness how dumb and stupid they are and all that. Then the kid goes to the barber shop and in the beauty parlor and listens to bitter grown people talking about, well, the man got everything against you, ain't no use trying, and so on and so forth. They grow up internalizing all of that, and when the parent out of bitterness says, you ain't gonna do nothing but run the streets like your mama and go to jail like your daddy, and they wind up doing these things, people wonder what happened.
How do you break that
program
cycle?
them to do that, okay? So this is where we have to really revolutionize things. Dr. Martin Luther King, in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here, written in 1967. Everybody should read that. That was a blueprint on what to do after the white and colored water fountain signs went down and after we got the right to vote. And if more people read it, I think we'd be better off. He said that when we deal with our adversaries, we have to be as armed with knowledge as they.
Ashe.
And he also said, how do we turn the ghetto into little schools across these United States, where street corners become places of learning instead of a place of trivial gossip, okay? In other words, he says those who are learned have to go out and reach the unlearned. Yep. And Marcus Garvey, in his book, The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, back in 1925 said that if you are intelligent, bear patience and forbearance with the illiterate. If the illiterate person tries to embarrass you when you try to correct them, just basically pay it no mind and understand the greater goal is for each of us to teach the others and bring us all up accordingly. But while teaching the illiterate, we have to remember that even though we may be educated in certain things to get ahead in society, they can teach us too.
Amen.
Because the great Egyptian wise man Ptah said back in 2300 BC that do not be proud and arrogant with your knowledge, that wisdom could be found with women at the millstones. So with an understanding of that, that's where we could perhaps come together and work. Now, there are people who say, well, you see, black people can't get together for anything. When you tell your child that, you are putting a bullet through that child's brain, because the child grows up believing that, and that kills the idea of unity. Now, the idea of unity does not mean that everyone is going to be on one accord with everything.
Right.
No race on this earth has that. It doesn't. What you want to do is get enough people who believe in an idea to come together and make things happen. Okay? Let's say that in New York City, your home city in New York, if some guy said, hey, I want to build an Empire State Building. And somebody said, man, you crazy. What you mean building a building 100 stories high? That ain't going to happen. Man, get out of here with that stuff. No, they got together enough people who believed in that idea to make that Empire State Building a reality. The entire population of New York didn't build that. A group of engineers and construction workers got together to build that Empire State Building. What if if the Wright brothers said, somebody told the Wright brothers, hey man, you can't fly in the air, and they listened to that? No, they got together and worked on that plane so that soon men was able to fly in something that was heavier in a balloon, right? The invention of things like television, cell phones, this very thing you're filming me on
Yes,
right
sir.
now. People came together with enough people who had that idea came together and make that the reality. The same they could do it with inventing these things, the same they could do with coming together to create a better spirit of education and cooperation that we so badly need.
Woo!
And I think we can end it there.
Yes, sir. And that's his final word. It has been Professor Damon at Hannibal. Hey, it's more than food, baby. It's more than food.